whose woods these are? I think I know. His house is in Village, though.
Real book. Can I request Mr. Carapole show? The book is being revealed to you, to the world, and go for it. There we go. Beginnings by Carol Paul Joseph. Has seen the light of day. All right, for that very important photograph, will you please hold the book?
To watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep.
All of us have a book inside us, but we never get down to writing that book. When I was small, or should I say when I was young, I did try writing, but it was quite forgettable, so I never wrote after that. A lot of my writing thereafter was to do with teaching or education purposes. But the urge to write never left me, and finally, in last year, I began this journey. Isabel Allende says, show up, show up, show up, and one day your muse will show up too. I showed up after more than 30 years, but I'm glad I did. I quite enjoyed the whole process. It's a book in iambic verse, and one doesn't get to read iambic verse very often. So I wanted to keep this verse alive because all the great poetry that we studied in school, Shakespeare, Marlowe, they've all written in iambic verse, Keats, Shelley, Browning, and so on. So for some reason, I just wanted to write something in iambic verse, and here it is, and I hope everyone enjoys it.
What's your passion that you had to be an author, or what was your other option?
No, I'm a teacher. First and foremost, I'm a teacher. Writing is just something that I wanted to do, but I think I was always meant to be a teacher and help others and guide others, and teach. But writing is something that I've wanted to do, and I'm glad I finally took that first step.
So what the special message that is there in your book that you want to give out to the
the themes are mostly universal. They'll deal about love, but they also deal with faith, relationships, trust, family, and so on. They are hopefully universal themes that a lot of people will identify with. If people say, yes, that happened to me, or yes, that's what I wanted to say, I'll be very happy. And if they find that I said what they wanted to say very well, then I'd be even happier.
So this is the journey that you came across, what you have done down
My father introduced me to poetry actually, and of course school, because we studied a lot of poetry in school, and it took me more than 30 years to write the first line, really. And I hope it'll not take me another 30 years to write the next book, because I plan to write one more this year.
So, how do you think that the new generation are going away from books, really?
Well, whenever you go to any bookstore in Goa, they say poetry doesn't sell. They only keep about 2 books in their shelves. I hope to keep this form alive of iambic verse. It's a very charming, very lovely form of verse, and I hope more and more people will read poetry, because ultimately poetry will tell you all the great truths of life. So it's something that they are familiar with, but it will tell it to them in a very refined and beautiful way.
So in future, do you think that this book's carrying, or you'll be going digitally someday?
It's already available online, but as a Kindle book, hopefully. It's not that I want people to buy this book only because I want to keep the verse form alive, and because I hope to articulate what they feel regularly, perhaps. I mean, love, relationships, these are something that we experience on a daily basis, right?
So your last message for the readers and all over the world.
I hope you enjoy the book. But if you've got a story inside you, let it come out. Yeah. Oh, that's it.
Being here, thank you for being a part of this beginning for Mr. Karen Paul Joseph. We know him in many aspects, as boss, as a friend, as Joey Carvalho will speak about him, and as a colleague, and of course he's a friend. I know some of the friends are here. But one thing that I think we keep reinventing ourselves time and again over the years, and we talk a lot about this for New Year's. I think all of us want to reinvent ourselves. Today we're here to see yet another side, a new side that is emerging of this gentleman that we know, a side of being an author, a side of being a writer, of putting his words out there for the world to see, to probably have some critique upon, and to share his journey into his new beginning. And the fact that we're all here, and we all are here to show support, and of course, to be a part of this new beginning, I, on behalf of Mr. Karen Paul Joseph and all the dignitaries gathered here, I'm extremely thankful. I was told to say this multiple times, not my words, because I think it takes a community to build something, and here we are. Our guest of honor this evening is Mr. Rohit Gera. I don't think this room needs an introduction to the gentleman, but maybe just a little bit, just a little bit. He is the managing director of the Gera Developments, and if I can say something about him that we all know but just underline, he's a trendsetter. He sets trends, he makes sure that the space he is in is creative, is designed well. The whole idea about child-centric homes is something that we're so closely seeing and feeling and interacting with, and of course TGS. I can see big smiles across the room. Nurturing individuality, I think that's something that was thought and sculpted, and that makes this creative process so much more bigger and better. So thank you so much for being here, sir. We also have with us Ms. Runa Menezes, and I'm trying to find her, she's there, she's going to be speaking with us. Can you please have her come forward? And Michelle Lafonso, can we please have you forward? And Mr. Joey Carvalho, please. These are the people who are going to be speaking to us this evening, and as I shared before, showing us different aspects of who this author is and how we're going to go ahead on this journey of poetry, of beginnings.
And us present here. A very good evening to all of you all. It gives me great happiness to participate in this event at this very memorable occasion and say a few words to introduce my very good friend Carol. Carol and I were born in the same city and went to the same school, St. Francis College in Lucknow. Albeit a decade apart. He's much younger than me, of course. Carol and I lived barely a kilometer away from one another, and we have a lot of happy memories to share about Lucknow and the time we were there. Carol's parents were teachers. Mr. Basil Joseph was the headmaster of our school. Of course, he was my headmaster too. And the whole of Lucknow admired him as an intelligent and stern, yet warm headmaster who worked meticulously and tirelessly for the school. Mrs. Evelyn Joseph was a loving and warm parent who toiled for her 6 children, and Carol pays her a moving tribute in one of his poems. But let us move to the great man Carol himself. Carol started his career at another of Lucknow's most prestigious schools, La Martiniere College, as a primary school teacher. Since then, he has traversed the length and breadth of India as a teacher, as a vice principal, and a principal. In his long career of over 3 decades, he has taught in and led some of India's most well-known schools: the Weinberg Allen School in Missouri, St. Paul's School in Darjeeling, and the Indus International School in Hyderabad. He now heads one of Goa's best-known schools, the Gera School. All of you all must be knowing the Gera School. Both of you, Mr. Gera and Carol, you can be proud of what you have achieved and accomplished for our beautiful state. For many in Goa speak very well of your school. Now, Carol, please don't interrupt me here. Ladies and gentlemen, I have met up with Carol's siblings and some of Carol's former schoolmates and colleagues, and they all say what I already knew. He is very hardworking, very intelligent, very good in his work, along with being a wonderful, humble, exemplary human being. He is very warm, helpful, thoughtful, generous, and may I add, spiritual as well. More pertinent to this occasion, he speaks well and he writes even better. In fact, we were surprised that he did not write something in prose. Those of us who know him and his work know he can write sweet prose. But poetry, that was one big pleasant surprise. Iambic verse, blank verse. We were blank when asked about this form of poetry and verse. His poetry is well crafted, insightful, and with a lovely turn of phrases. I shall say no more, for I can see him swimming in his seat already. Besides, we have 2 more people to talk a little more of the poetry. Thank you, Carol, for this book. May your school keep growing. May you keep writing, and in different forms, and so delight an ever-growing body of readers. My wife, Olive, who's like a sister to him, and I warmly wish you the very best in the years ahead at the Gera School and in your writing. God bless Carol and all of us here. Thank you.
Songs are those that tell of saddest thought, said Percy Bysshe Shelley in iambic verse. Good evening, everyone. Guest of honor, Mr. Rohit Gera, our newly minted writer and poet, Mr. Carol Joseph, coordinators of the Gera School, esteemed guests, teachers, parents, and students. I can at least see one in the audience. Being a student and teacher of English literature myself, I'm here to offer my perspective of beginnings from a literature point of view. When I began reading the poems, I was reminded of P.B. Shelley's iconic poem To a Skylark, from which I quoted at the start. Listen to the words again. We look before and after and pine for what is not. Our sincerest laughter with some pain is fraught. Our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought. I found Shelley's lines so apt, not only because they are written in iambic verse, or because Shelley has admittedly been an inspiration to Mr. Joseph, but also because the words ring true for many of the poems in this collection. Some of the most beautiful poems in Beginnings have a lingering sadness to them. But that's not the tone of the book overall, and I hope to give you a teaser of the book without giving away too many spoilers. What struck me as I began to pore over Beginnings was that in its flow and structure and the arrangement of the poems, it reads like a story. The collection has such an organic flow and progression of themes from one poem to another. Let me explain. The way I see it, the book starts with the theme of birth. The birth of a poem in the mind of the poet. It moves on to reveal the self-doubt of a budding poet, an impassioned plea for the nascent poems to come to fruition. It then proceeds to the theme of love, followed by the birth of a child. And then, after taking us through a roller coaster of themes, emotions, and slices of life, the book comes full circle with the poem titled and dedicated to Mother. The beauty of the poems is that, despite having an almost dreamlike, sublime, transcendental quality, each poem is so grounded and relatable, such as the poem which expresses the plea of parents to spare their child from the pain, tears, and strife, and instead to heap them all on us, the parents. I'm sure all parents would relate to that. I could completely identify with and loved the chemistry, conflict, and surprise elements in sorting it out. And I could feel the helplessness and desperation of a person still in love in the poem, Can We Start Over? I must say, these poems have the ability to move people, and sometimes to move them to tears, because I felt very emotional when I read Beyond the Miles, which I thought was a heart-rending plea for restoration and reconciliation. What poignance and poetry in the lines. These summer winds waft not your scent my way, and when the stars communion with you, they wickedly wink not a hint at me. When a poet writes and reveals such raw and unpretentious emotions, it's often tempting for the reader-critic to wonder, how much of this is autobiographical? Well, autobiographical or not, it is clearly inspired by real life, by close observation of society and relationships. When I read many of the poems, I felt, this is me. This is exactly the way I'd think or react. Or, I've been here. I know what this feels like. And it is this that gives the poems its very relatable quality and universal appeal. The fact that for those who read it, it will be hard not to see a little of yourself, your emotions, your experiences, or that of people you know, reflected in the poems. Clearly, the poems are an affirmation of the goodness of human nature, an assertion of faith, and a reminder of the importance of good relationships. And the poet, I dare say, he is at once a hopeless romantic, a man of great faith, a sensitive and empathetic individual, and a keen observer of life and human behavior. I have enjoyed reading every iambic tetrameter line in this book, and all the delightful nuances hidden between the lines. And this is, of course, apart from the fact that I've enjoyed flexing at home, showing off to my son that I've got an autographed copy of the first book written by the principal of his school. TGS, you're lucky to have a persona like Mr. Joseph at the helm of affairs and leading by example. I, for one, am sure that every time I turn the pages of the book, it will reveal a new insight or unravel a fresh perspective. I'm sure the book will continue to inspire minds, both young and mature. And I'm certain, Mr. Joseph, that all those poems and books still trapped in that brilliant mind of yours will see the light of day and find concrete shape in the form of many more books from you. Congratulations, Mr. Joseph, once again, and all the best to you. Thank you.
For that introduction. Mr. Guerra, it was a pleasure hearing you at school this morning, and I'm delighted to have you here with us today also. Mr. Carol Joseph, I don't know where to start and whether we can ever end speaking about the delightful person that Mr. Carol Joseph is. As I read through each and every of the 19 poems written in beginnings, I pictured Mr. Joseph sitting possibly at a bay window in his house or on the shores of the beach, looking into the distance as he drew inspiration for beginnings from the serenity of the surroundings, or maybe the glamour brought on by a busy beach. But whatever it was, every single poem, like Ms. Runa said, touched me in a different way. And with your permission, Mr. Joseph, if I can quote a paragraph from one of the poems which had me in tears actually, the last one in your book, To Mother. This is how it starts. Dear Mom, how do you mark your birthdays now? With Dad? Or not at all? Or silently? With the vast commune in the clear white vault of heaven? But not with us. And that's what brings the tears. As I read this poem, I thought about my 11-year-old who's been with Mr. Joseph from grade 1 at the Vienna School. And I wondered whether, when it was time for me to cross over, she would have the same gratitude that Mr. Joseph had as he wrote this final poem in the book. As Jessica very rightly said, I have been one of those who've read the newsletters from day one. And as I keep telling Mr. Joseph every time I meet him in school, those newsletters speak to you because it is written from a wise man. It is written by a well-read man, someone who really knows prose, who really knows how to communicate to people of all genres, whether it is a nursery child or a parent like you and me, or even a grandparent, because some of these newsletters I do share with my mom. And she turns around and says, I need to meet Mr. Joseph, and that day will soon come, Mr. Joseph. Some of the qualities that have really struck me about Mr. Carol Joseph is the fact that he is very empathetic. He is well read, he is involved, and if I may say, silently vocal. There have been so many issues at the Guerra School, but I've never seen Mr. Joseph ruffled. I've never heard him raise his voice like I do sometimes. And I've learned from him the art of being patient with little kids and adults too in interactions of different kinds. Thank you, Mr. Joseph, for adding to the volume of poetry, which is very sadly lacking, not only in Goa, but I think across. Your teachers at Carrera School do a wonderful job of trying and instilling the importance of poetry and language in students. And I think this book is something that should draw everybody to the library. I cannot see Miss Vienna. She will be, oh, there she is, yes. My daughter loves Miss Vienna and she loves the library. And I'm sure that this book will be one that will hold its pride of place on the shelves of the library in the school and all other schools, colleges and universities, not only in Goa, but across the country and beyond. I wish you so much luck, Mr. Joseph, in writing more and bringing to us facets of your life that will speak volumes about your journey. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I am extremely happy to be here this evening. I was sitting with Carol earlier today. I asked him, what do you want me to talk about? And he replied, I don't know. This is my first book. I said, all right, I'll come up with something. He then asked me, he said, so what did you think of poems? So I said, I will let you know when I speak on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, a first book is a huge deal, right? Even before you take the plunge of doing it, one will grapple with, should I do it? Am I good enough? Who will read it? Why will anyone read it? These are things which you naturally would go through before taking the plunge to then write your first book. Even after you muster up the courage, you then come to the point, how will it be received? We are at that point in time. I have to confess, I am not any expert in anything literary. I am illiterate in many ways. But now that he asked the question and asked me to be chief guest, he has put this undue pressure on himself as to what my opinion is going to be, which really, has no sort of. Anyway, so I want to talk about one of the poems called "Being Vulnerable," right? Where he talks about intimacy, deep sharing, the fears of being judged, and it related to me as well. Right? I read it the first time and viewed it from the lens of personal vulnerability, personally sharing, sharing intimately with a loved one at a deep, deep level. So I said, okay, this is pretty cool. I then read it again. This time I saw it through the lens of an artist, any artist. And I urge you to read this one with this view in mind. And he has a line in there which says, what follows is the agony of wait. And if you think about it, every artist, when they put out their body of work, you have the agony of wait. This is the agony of wait. Yeah. But I think, it's over, it's done. You heard from the experts. You're hearing from the not expert. I think when you create something which can be looked at and through so many different lenses, and it appeals to people in different walks of life from different perspectives, I think you've hit the mark. So I was so amazed to read this, and just how it goes into, like I said, the different facets of different people. Life is just blew me away. So when you do this, you bring out the skill of the artist, right? And I know you literary folks will think this is not artist. We should use the word poet. Yes, I get it. So congratulations, Carol. I wish you much success and great success with this book. And I hope now that you've got the first one out of the way, we'll see many, many more. And like others said, in not just one form, but multiple forms. Congratulations and all the best. Thank you.
Congratulations to the author for the launch. Thank you so very much to everybody on stage for being a part of this book launch. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Today I'm not listening to you. I've done my time listening to you in the office. Today you have to listen to me. So I said, okay, you're the MC, you tell me what to do. For those of us who are parents here, and I cannot help but think today of Jonathan and Rissa, who are always my thoughts, but when we've held our child, we're so amazed because this little thing is supposed to be us. And when we hold that first baby, you're almost tempted to say, that's me and there. And somebody, and people will come and say, oh, he looks just like you. He's got your eyes. When my son William was born, they said, looks like you, but he's got his mother's hair. And then as they grow up, of course, they keep changing, and then you soon realize they've got a bit of you and a bit of the other, and so on. But a parent, yeah, I know we don't. It's easy becoming a parent, but being a parent is difficult. And a lot of parents, I know, having dealt with many parents over 33 years, you find some parents they don't be like good parents. But at the same time, I'm sure at the end they just want to do their best for the child. And this plea where he says, he's holding his child and says, I read the story, when we were in school, I read the story of Baba and Hermione. And when Hermione is sick, he says, he walks around the bed and says, give me his sickness. And he walks around the bed 3 times. And then the son gets well, and the father falls ill, and the father dies. So I talked of he quavered, is this a part of me? It was his thought. No words escaped his lips. But he was awed that part of him could flow into another being, amalgamate, be born anew, but neither him nor her, or so he hoped. And then he says, dear God, who gives and takes with oft no reason clear, give unto her the sublimation of our toil, our love, our toil, our care, our victories. As with the Mughal king, take all her pain, her allocated shares of tears and strife, and heap them all on us, so help us, Lord. And then we'll feel our lives were not in vain, and the totality of all our days is essentialized and crystallized in hers. And to all her world she shines a star, giving light, love and light from near and far. As parents, when our children do well, it's all that matters. And no matter how successful we are, if our children don't do well, we just feel we haven't done enough. Somehow we fail. Beyond the miles that separate us both, beyond this cloudy chasm, beyond all that holds the 2 of us in helpless thrall, there beat 2 hearts. All right, I shall not speak for you, and let your heart one day tell of the residue of love that feels for me, since you have blocked all access to your life. Out there in the woods, your life's a secret now. These summer winds waft not your scent my way, and when the stars communion with you, they wickedly wink not a hint to me. So when a traveler or a wandering minstrel emerges from the woods, my watchful eyes light up. I hasten slowly to their side and gently ask, but not in pressing tones, lest brows be raised and they think ill of me, what work you do and how you keep in health. I'd fain ask more, for all of me has longed for just one single glimpse of thee, one word, one touch. You cannot know how lonely life has been since we went our ways in March. As days grow shorter and the shadows lengthen, I wonder when the clouds will part, and I will know how deep and wide is my abyss. We knew so well the stirring Corinthian words, and indeed were kind and tender all the time. But keen to fill the emptiness in us, our clanging demands resounding in our heads, it had to fail. For hope and trust could not survive the childish ways we sought to heal. Yet through the emptiness there's no regret, for me at least. I shall not speak for you. Beyond the miles that separate us both, know that your love has buoyed and strengthened me. And as for you, know that my love and prayers will abide with you now and evermore. But every now and then, a picture on the wall, a word that's said, or a deed not done, stirs up my heart and all its longings deep. My senses seem aflame, and 'tis a while before the wine lulls me to sleep, but not before I call your name 1,000 times, and wish that all our differences would cease, for bliss to be, and only be, with you and me. The last one that I will read is to Mother. Teachers earn really poor salaries in those days. Dad and Mom would be working round the clock just to make ends meet, and well, they had 6 children, so to raise a family of 8 on 6 children on 2 teachers' salary, not good. And my mom didn't work for many years because it was not possible to work and look after kids. So life was very tough growing up. But she was there with us. She was very, very positive, very cheerful, very gritty. Dad was obviously busy at work, but he passed away when I was about 17. So he died very young. And we spent most of our time with Mom. And then, of course, when he passed away, we spent about 27 more years with her before she passed on in 2015. So we spent a lot of time with Mom, and actually we were close to Mom. Just to give you a context, it's not possible to when you're working and you're going to make 30 chapatis or 35 chapatis to make each of them, like pulkas. And when you've got a dish to make, you're not going to spend hours browning the meat and making sure the onions are done fine. So Mom would cook just find the easiest way to make stuff that we didn't enjoy. One of the reasons I started, because you look at me and I like good food. And that's why I started cooking, because I wanted to help Mom and I wanted to cook food. But she was a good cook, but on a daily basis, difficult to make the right food that would, and spend a lot of time in the kitchen. So that explains one of the lines here. But she would always be a darling to all 6 of us. Dear Mom, how do you mark your birthdays now? With Dad, or not at all? Or silently with the vast commune in the clear white vault of heaven? But not with us. And that's what brings the tears. Your picture on the wall reminds me of your warm and beaming smile, your hearty laugh, with not a glimpse of all the pain endured, not 1 or 2, but 6 to bear. What's more, to cook and clean and wash and scrub for 8. Never mind the not so tasty vegetables. Your picture on the wall reminds me of the grit and positivity that lives in me, in all of us actually. Oh Mother, how will all the years of fond remembering and loving kisses to a frame make up for all you've done for us? How will my sighs and tears and grateful whispers evoke responses from across the void? You would be omnipresent if you wished, and though not omniscient, would always know what burns in each child's mind and beats in each child's heart. Is that not right? Is that not so? Belong you may to worlds light years removed, but don't forget the child whose heart beats wildly for you still. And that's the last poem I did on Mother. And one of the picture that's there is, what do they call it, Mr. Jessica here? Rogardo, right. That's my mother used to often grind rice for idlis and sannas there on that stone. And of course, Christmas time it was used for salt meat. And I still have that stone. It's a very heavy stone. Whenever I move, whoever's carrying that stone really curses the packers and movers, because they say, "Don't you have a mixie now? Why are you carrying this?" And I say, "No, just carry it to the truck." Yeah, that's what she used to use, and so that reminds me of all the hard work that she used to do in raising 8 kids. But I won't keep you there longer. I hope you enjoy the book. I hope there should be enough for you if you wish to. These were the starters, and if you want the main course, then the books there at the back. I have signed a few, and have you signed more? I want not because I want an alternative career, not because I want a source of income. I think I want the book because these are emotions that all of us feel, and if ever you feel, as all three of them said, if you feel this is what I felt, and he said just what I wanted to say but couldn't say, then I would be delighted, because then I wouldn't know that I haven't articulated what's in the core of your being. And that's the whole idea. I probably will lose a lot with the books and all the cost that's gone into the books, but for me it was about getting that first book, and even when I write the second book, it's about keeping Iambic verse alive. I went to Crossword, I went to so many bookstores, not fair to mention the name, but I went to all the bookstores and said, "Where's your poetry section?" They said, "No one reads poetry." Yeah. There were 2. There's Rupi Kaur and there's Rumi. And there were just 2 books in the whole store. And in fact, when I was starting to write, someone told me, "Why are you writing verse? No one reads verse. Why aren't you writing prose? You can write prose, right? Write prose." And I said, "But I like verse." And I hope that by you reading this, you will find yourself in it. Don't look for me in it, even if it's romantic poetry, even if I am a romantic. But I hope you find yourself in it, or find somebody you know, family or someone you meet. I hope they resonate with what you do, with a personal experience or something that you've seen or read about, and that would be, I think, the happiest. That it's not something only me. It's a universal experience. So yes, all I'd say is, if you've got a story too inside you, to use the phrase that author used, die empty. Don't take your dreams to the next world. They probably stay behind in this world. Just be happy that you did whatever you could. I'm happy. I'm pleased with this one. I hope to get better every time I write. And yes, thank you very, very much for being here today. It means a lot.
Thank you so very much. Congratulations. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrap. We're here. The book launch is done. The books are available right behind.
Mr. Guerra, like I said, I know you keep an extremely busy schedule, and he did share with me one thing. He says, "I don't do chief guests. I never do." So, all the more, I was very grateful that you're here. Thank you to you, Ms. Runa and Ms. Cheryl, for all the lovely words you said. He was tough, trying to avoid not having a lump in my throat. Thank you, Joey, for those wonderful, warm words. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I suppose all of us have a book inside, it just never comes out. I always wanted to write. When I was in my late teens and early 20s, I did try writing one poem and a couple of short stories, which I sent to various magazines. I remember in those days, there was Illustrated Weekly and Femina. And I did send it with a self-addressed envelope. The duty came back, all I never wrote thereafter. But the urge to write was always there. At TGS, we have regular personal and professional development workshops. It was, I think, in 2022 that at one such workshop, I was telling staff about an anecdote from a book, The Accidental Creative. And in that book, one person asks, what's the most valuable piece of real estate? So I asked the staff, what's the most valuable piece of real estate that they know? And then they were all thinking, they said, Agonda is becoming the new place. And Donapol's are very expensive, and Kadamba is now coming up, and so on. And I said, no, they said Panjim, Altin, very, very expensive. Then I said, no, according to the book, the most valuable piece of real estate is the graveyard, because in that lie all our unfinished projects, all our unfulfilled dreams, all our unreconciled relationships, all the things that we said, we'll do it tomorrow, but our tomorrows run out. And so our dreams die with us. So I remember telling staff at that time, I'm going to write a book. I thought at least, because I wanted to write, and in all these years I had never written, I thought by saying it, then at least I've committed myself and made the first step and it would happen. But it didn't happen. As you said, it's both procrastination, but I think a lot of it is with self-doubt. Who will buy the book? Will it be read? Will it be worth it? It almost sounds presumptuous when you say, I'll be a writer, I'll write poetry, and it doesn't happen. And then a very dear friend got after me and said, well, you better write. So my friend said, one way to do it is to invest time and resources. And so he created a small writing space for me. He created it and designed it and said, now that's your space. And now let it remind you of what you are to do. And then if you don't write, then you know it's all about you. That book will, every time you cross that space, it will remind you. So the space was designed and then yes, I would feel bad that he went through all that trouble, very lovingly created it, but I'm not doing it. So I wrote the first poem, and then it took me about 8 weeks before then I wrote the next. It so happened that I saw online a competition which says write a poem, 21 poems in 21 days. I couldn't do it in the first 21, so I enrolled for the next 21 days, and I managed to write 18 poems there. It also included a week's leave in the summer break, where I then managed to write because it took me about 3-4 days to write one poem. And the minimum was 18, I managed 19. They agreed to publish, I said, okay, let's go. In my youth, when I loved Thomas Hardy, Charles Dickens, George Eliot. These were my three of my favorite. Not that I was well read, but partly because we studied them in school. But poetry, the fascination of poetry never left. And it so happened that I wrote iambic verse. I liked iambic verse. And a lot of what we speak is iambic verse. Like, what have you done? What is your name? And it's iambic because it's made up of 2 units. One is an unstressed followed by a stressed syllable. So you go, what is your name? Right? My name is Vesh, Naveed, Vinod. And so you go, like, for example, an unstressed followed by a stress. Even something like, will you please pass the salt? will you please pass the salt, is iambic. And a lot of our speech is iambic. It comes closest to human speech, which is why Shakespeare took it in the first place and popularized it. But the challenge, of course, is to write iambic verse line after line. And not just write iambic verse, but to write poetry that would be interesting to all and people would resonate with what's written there. Anything that we do must emanate from the principles that we live by, the values we espouse, the actions we define. We can't fake it for long, because then people will see us for what we are, a fraud. So over time, whether it's your work or a relationship, it has to come from within our being. It has to come naturally to us. And it must be felt. You must live and move and have your being, and then something worthwhile comes out. In relationships, at work, wherever. And the same with art and literature. Poetry must have authenticity and a seriousness of purpose, even when dealing with small things or big things. Poetry is the chiseled expression of the distillate of all the things that happen in our lives. I say chiseled expression because while you extract it, because it has brevity and intensity, you might in a prose novel you might use thousands of words, but in a poem you've got to have economy with words, and so you say it in as few words as possible, but you have to say it well. And so that's why I say the chiseled expression. Some of what I write, as you said, it will be, the temptation is to think, if there's a love poem, who's he talking about? Who could it be? But a lot of times I looked, yes, some are drawn from personal experience. Which of us hasn't cried at night? Which of us has not fallen in love? Which of us has not had failed relationships? Even as a child, we probably had a crush, whether it's on a teacher or a fellow student, and then we realized we had all these dreams, but never happened. So yes, we grow. We like the girl next door, the boy next door, but never have the courage to summon up the courage to say, make the first move. But there are times we've struggled with faith, we've struggled with trust, we've struggled with work, we've struggled with so many things. So I've tried to write about different themes. I drew inspiration from sometimes what siblings went through, what friends went through, what I read about. In fact, being vulnerable which Mr. Guerra talked about, was about, and we've all had that actually. You say something to somebody and that person judges you, or you run the risk of then having that person throw it up to you at a later date. So you're careful about what you reveal. Even best friends might say something. So we tend to be careful about revealing ourselves. We always guard ourselves. That's why they say, keep a secret. It's your master, tell a secret, and you're its slave. And a wife told her husband something, and first he told her something, and she said, no, I must tell you my secret. And she told him something, and he was very upset, and they separated. And I thought, how sad. You shared, and that was the end of it. So a lot of times I've tried to draw inspiration from people's experiences. I hope to write a longer plain verse, choosing from mythology, Christian mythology, Hindu mythology, Right now, Lord Ram fascinates me, not because of Ayodhya or anything, but what he goes through and what Sita goes through. It's one of the things that's been on my mind. History. For example, what would Ashoka have been through? What would have been his thoughts? Or would he have judged himself? So, after the Battle of Kalinga. So, I would like to draw from history, from mythology for my next verse. Yes, I do hope to write a book. I enjoy prose as well, but it's easier to sometimes write a small piece than to write 5,000 word novel. I hope you enjoy the poems. I am told that as part of a book launch, I'm supposed to read a couple of poems. So if you don't mind, I will read some of a few poems that